So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another Southend Dog Training Podcast. This week's guest, Kelly, has a very, very interesting story to tell about French Bulldogs, and hopefully it might educate some of you guys that have a French Bulldog or maybe thinking about getting a French Bulldog or any Brachycephalic dog for that matter. Those of you listening that may not be aware what a Brachycephalic dog is, that means dog with flat face. So that could be a Boston Terrier, a Pug, a French Bulldog, a Shih Tzu, etc. This podcast is going to be all about that. So can we just start, Kelly? First of all, thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
I know this is your first podcast and I know you're a little bit nervous, but honestly, you have nothing to worry about. Really grateful that you was able to come on because this is a very, very important story. Obviously, You've been through the ringer a little bit with your dog. Mm-hmm. Can we start by introducing Rolo to the listeners? What kind of dog he is and how did he become part of your family?
So, we have Rolo, who is French Bulldog. He is black and tan, and the reason I say that is obviously there are some more exotic sort of breeds and colours and things like that also coming in. Rolo is black and tan. He was born in January 2021, and we actually got him in the March of 2021. And my whole family, my husband, my two children have always... Can we get a dog? Can we get a dog? Can we get a dog? And I was always had the same response was, we're out of the house for too long. Kids are at school. We're both at work. Like, it's not fair. And then I got a new job that was remote, working from home. And it was almost like, oh, well, now we can get a dog. So that kind of propelled us to start sort of looking at different breeds.
Okay. What drew you specifically to the French Bulldog? Why a French Bulldog? And what sort of research did you do before landing on Rolo?
So it's quite interesting actually, because we researched sort of as a family, and my husband and I, and on the internet, all different breeds of dogs, the whole range. And yes, it obviously came up French Bulldogs and their potential health issues, their breathing problems. But what I did find as well was that it was such a broad spectrum, where it seemed to me that every breed that I sort of researched, or that we felt, we was looking at temperament, we were looking at, are they good with children, how many hours of walking do they need, and, to fit within the family. And it kind of felt like every single breed of dog had the potential for health issues, but none of it was, this is really quite a prominent thing. The breeds of dogs that had hip problems, ear problems, eye problems, breathing problems. So when researching different breeds, there wasn't a specific issue that sort of popped out. It was like, oh, it seems like it's a bit of a roulette sometimes. They've all got these, things that they're susceptible to.
Yep. The thing is, right, you're absolutely right. Every breed you research, there's a little fly on our table. Yeah. Go away, little fly. Any breed that you research, obviously there are potential good and bad things about them, like heavy breeds, Rottweilers, German Shepherds, they're prone to hip problems. But yeah, you landed on a French Bulldog.
Yes.
I want to circle back to something you said earlier, because you opted for a black and tan. Mm-hmm. Rolo is black and tan.
Yes.
Yeah. Because in my experience, the sort of singular colours, like the tan ones or even the black and tan, these seem to be the healthier versus like the lilac ones, the Merle ones, and things like that. So obviously you've done your research, you decided to avoid the more exotic colours, and landed on Rolo, a black and tan. Did you go to a breeder for...
So it's worth noting that we'd never had dogs before. We've never owned a dog before. My husband had dogs as a child, but they were his parents, dogs. And I feel like this is where we failed.
Okay.
So during this process where we were looking, we settled on the French Bulldog. more for the characteristics and child friendly, and we've got 2 children as well, and slightly smaller but not too small, and so that's why we settled on the French Bulldog. And during this process we were sort of still talking, still going through the motions, and my husband happened to mention, I think we're gonna get a French Bulldog, like Kelly's finally caved. And I was like, a friend of a friend, there's just not long had puppies, I'm sure she's got a couple left. And so we didn't research, if I'm honest, and that's really where we failed.
No, and one of the reasons that you're on here today is for this very story. Before we started this podcast, me and you was having a conversation about a message that I got just yesterday about somebody that had got a Mastiff. Well, they believed it was a Mastiff. Now they found out it's actually an XL Bully, and now they're worried.
Yeah.
And again, this goes back to the not researching the breeder and things like this. And when people like yourself go and get a dog, you're going in there innocent, you're going in there with the best of intentions. And this is one of the things I really want this podcast to be about more than anything else. Isn't the mistakes that you've made or anything like that. It's not to make you look bad. It's not to make you come across as bad. It's to educate the public on the importance of finding a decent breeder. And right at the end, I will give my notes to the audience listening, what to look for in a decent breeder and those potential red flags.
Yes.
But anyway, you got Rolo for a friend of a friend.
Yes.
To be fair, before I knew any different, I got a dog from a breeder. I wrote about it in my story. Didn't know at the time, and sadly that ended in disaster.
Right.
She had a birth defect and she died. The health checks and everything weren't there.
Yeah.
You seem like you possibly come out the other side, whereas I wasn't so lucky, and this is why this is such an important thing to me. Before I got into dog training, before I knew about breeders, before I knew about what to look for, I very innocently ended up getting a dog. So I've been there, and I know the shit and the stress that it can cause people. So I've told my story, it's in my book, but it's nice for other people to tell their story, because nobody does it on purpose. A friend of a friend.
It was a friend of a friend, so you kind of go, is that sort of a recommendation almost? You word of mouth, things like that is another thing that you need to sort, that we considered. And honestly, we went to see Rolo, and if I'm honest, again, this is where my mindset, my focus, I guess, changed. So we went, and Rolo was there with his sister. There was two left. And there was 2 children in the house, and my focus was on what's the dogs like with the children, and they couldn't give a toss. The kids were running around, there was a little toddler there, and I was like, this is amazing, because then my sort of focus sort of changed. It was more what the dog's like with the children that are around, and then that became really important at the time. And then he was going to come with his injections and his papers, and and it was all sort of ticking the boxes once I was there as well. So I hands up, didn't do the research that I fully agree should be done.
It's very easy for your judgment to be clouded and things like that. When I picked up Daisy, my Rottweiler, she actually come from a school friend of mine. She had a litter of puppies. I knew the person personally. But one of the deciding factors for me when I went there is there was a bunch of kids in the house. The mum was there. The mum's temperament was sound. The puppies were already used to that exposure to children and things like that. So that was fantastic. And that was a big positive, obviously, to be able to see that the dog there, because being a mum, instantly you want a dog that can grow up with the kids, that's going to be safe around the kids. And I can see why you landed on a French Bulldog, because French Bulldogs primarily are fantastic with children. Any Bulldog for that nature, whether it's American, whether it's English, if you remove the health problems, temperament wise, they're fantastic.
Incredible.
Like, they're so funny, so entertaining. They're not the brightest sparks at all. They sleep upside down a lot. They snore, they fart. Like, what's not to love? But obviously that clouded your judgment a little bit.
Yes.
And then certain things can be neglected. The other thing is, I was speaking to my client the other day, when you go to get a puppy, and you've chosen that puppy, or you've chosen that breeder, or you've made that journey to go, your heart is set on coming home with a dog. So there's really not, it's very difficult to walk away. Yeah, particularly if you don't know the red flags to look for. So you found Rolo, this black and tan French Bulldog, good with kids. What was it like when you brought Rolo home? What were the early days like? Obviously, did you notice any problems straight away, or was it just...
No, so as I say, I was... due to some of the research, I was aware of some things to look out for on the actual dog, as in, you know, their noses, they can, you know, where they're so squished. And Rolo had quite a prominent nose, and that was something that I was like, oh, he's got a... In comparison to his sister even that was there, his nose was a little bit more prominent. We took him to the vets, literally, I think it was the next day or the day after, and I was like, can you look him over, like, everywhere? Like, clean bill of health. He was lovely condition, good coat, you know, checked his, you know, little gums, and absolutely fine. He was in good condition, he was healthy. We brought him home, and I mean, the girls just, as you can imagine, just absolutely and Sophie, I remember Sophie, she was 7, 8 at the time. She was like, what we can keep him. So amazing. No immediate signs. He was a puppy, chewing everything, weeing everywhere. You know, just brought a whole new ball of energy into the home. And he settled very quickly, honestly, and became a member of the family almost from day dot.
I love that. What were the kids' reactions? Obviously, you said, can we keep him? Because when we got Myla from the rescue, the kids had no idea that we was bringing Myla home. Obviously, the kids were born into a house that already had dogs, but Myla... my latest acquisition, say latest, I've had her 2 years now, but Myla, the little accident rescue dog that I've got, they had no idea. They went to school, they had no idea they were coming back to the rescue. I mean, when they went to school, I had no idea I was coming back with a rescue. I just went to donate some food to a rescue that put a post out on Facebook asking for donations because they were running short on food. Took some food and then come back with Myla. But I remember... going to pick Grace up from school, and I took Myla with me, and she come, and her face, like just that moment moments like that are precious.
Yes.
How old are your children?
So I've got a almost 15-year-old now and an 11-year-old.
Not too dissimilar to me then. I've got an 11-year-old and a 16-year-old and a 10-year-old.
Oh.
All girls. So audience
both
at
mine
home.
are girls as well. So I feel for you.
Yeah.
But no, we actually did something not so dissimilar. So the girls were at a friend's house, and we went to get him. My husband and I come home, got him home, and then Mark went to get the girls and brought them home, and then just this little puppy sort of run up to him at the door, and they just, like, you know, and they were screaming. And Rolo wasn't phased, you know, like, this is a thing as well, and got down on the floor, and that's when Sophie was like, oh, we can keep him.
That's adorable. So, life's good. Mm-hmm. Got a puppy.
Yep.
Kids are happy.
Yep. Took
it to the vets. Vets are happy.
Yep.
When did you start to notice something wasn't quite right?
So, please don't shoot me, because I know better now, but Rolo was fed on kibble.
Okay.
So when we brought him home, they gave us a Royal Canine kibble. Mm-hmm. And so we continued on that because we knew first time owners didn't want to upset his tummy or anything. And we noticed it was around the November time. So we got him in the March 2021, and it was around the November time we started to notice, as he was growing a little bit, that he was gagging a lot. That was the first sort of sign. So he would eat. I mean, he used to wolf his food down like he was starving anyway. But as he was getting a bit bigger, we noticed that after eating, he would sort of gag quite a lot. And his breathing became a bit noisier. He started to sound a little bit more piglet-like. And so that's when we started to pick up on, you know, he was gagging a lot again today. Like, you know, after each feed, he was gagging a lot, and we was like, oh, that's not right, you know. And I sort of put it down to maybe he's eating too quickly, and you know, we actually got him a slow feeder bowl, which in hindsight now was hilarious because he couldn't get to anything because of obviously their noses. He just couldn't get to anything. So I was like, well, we can't starve him. But we, you know, again, on the internet, doing some research, and it was, you know, try a raised feed bowl. So we, you know, got raised feed bowls, and it kind of wasn't improving. And if anything, it started to get worse, and the gagging became, instead of a gag, it became a gag and spit up. It's the only way I can describe it, because it wasn't sick. I later found out it was regurgitation.
Yeah, like
it was
bile,
yes,
white phlegmy,
foam.
that.
Yeah, so it was gagging at first, but then it was, after, you know, backwards and forwards trying different things, it then became progressive, and it was gagging followed by regurgitation. And I would go backwards and forwards to the vets, you know, as you do. Something's not right here, you know. He's every time and it became every time we gave him a treat as well. So like, we'd be doing some training with him, and you know, give him a treat, and he would just gag and spit it up, and it would be like, this is impossible. Like, he's not keeping nothing down as such. But backwards and forwards to the vets, it was, it's acid reflux. It's we'll give him an anti-sickness injection, and I couldn't explain it at the time. I was like, he's not being sick, because, as you know, there's quite a laboured sort of motion when they're being sick, and this wasn't it, and I couldn't describe it. But anyway, that's kind of when we started to notice. It was around the November time, and it sort of slowly got worse and worse and worse.
Okay, before we go any further, I'm just going to harp back, because you asked me not to shoot you. I'm not going to shoot you. But in case anybody at home is listening going, I feed my dog kibble. What's wrong with kibble?
No, I'm sorry.
Nothing's wrong with kibble. Royal Canin, crap. And there's a lot of kibbles out there that are rubbish. I'm not going to turn this too much into a diet, but basically, there are good kibbles, there are bad kibbles. If you want to know if the kibble's any good, look at the first ingredient. If the first ingredient isn't a proper meat, if it says something like meat derivatives or cereal or something like that, the first ingredient is what makes up the bulk of the food. So unless it's like a high percentage of meat, you just don't want it. It's just crap. Then obviously just look at the rest of the ingredients, like, because a lot of these foods have a lot of additives and fillers in that are no good to the dogs. You see a lot of health problems like acid reflux. I can see why the vet first thought acid reflux, because a symptom of acid reflux is being sick but not proper retching, bringing up almost like this phlegm, like white phlegm, foamy type phlegm. I knew a Rottweiler that suffered of acid reflux. It seems to be quite common with Rottweilers. Whereas if you feed them 3 small meals a day versus 1 big meal, that can generally help. Or sometimes even 3 or 4 smaller meals versus 1 or 2 meals, that can help with that. So I can see why the vet led toward acid reflux. But yeah, when it comes to kibble, there are certain brands out there that are just terrible. But if you're feeding kibble at home, as long as it's a high quality kibble, there is nothing wrong with kibble, guys.
The only reason as well that I mentioned it was because it was the puppy kind, so it was like a curved, and I wasn't sure if that was getting stuck in his throat. You know, like that was the other thing. So that was the other reason why I mentioned.
No, I mean, as we know, diet can play a huge part, and obviously people at home with Frenchies can probably relate to this, but it's not exclusive to Frenchies. But Frenchies are quite prone to allergies. Yes. I see so many Frenchies suffering with skin conditions, ear problems, anal gland problems, and a lot of the time it can be cured by changing the diet. A lot of Frenchies thrive on like a raw food diet, which is what I advocate for a dog. It doesn't mean if you've got a French Bulldog at home that it can't do great on kibble. But if it is got allergies and things like that, then looking into a raw food diet could help. Anyway, I don't want to digress too much away from what's going on. Obviously, back and forth to the vets. When did you definitively get the diagnosis for the problems that you was having? Like,
So I think during that backwards and forwards to the vets, and obviously they were thinking, it does not, we're doing everything that we can. I think that, process of elimination sort of thing. They referred us to a specialist, soft tissue specialist in Langdon, Southfield.
Yeah, I've been there.
And they did an assessment and determined BOAS. Was the cause of Rolo's discomfort, noisy breathing, regurgitation, and all of our issues basically. And when they said, it's BOAS, and we actually researched BOAS in it was like yep. So that was in the May that we were referred, and then he very shortly after had, well, I don't like to use routine BOAS surgery.
Yeah. But you're not wrong. BOAS surgery is probably the most common surgery that is likely to happen if you have a French Bulldog, particularly one that has breathing difficulties. A few summers ago was working with a French Bulldog that was reactive to dogs, and literally at the sight of dogs, this dog would get so stressed that it actually sounded like it was going to die.
Yeah.
And I said to him, your dog has to have the surgery before I can do anything with it. We always recommend that a dog gets a vet check first. If we think there's something wrong with a dog, we'll stop and we'll make sure if they have a vet check, because it's so important to rule out anything underlying. They were recommended by a vet that the dog in the future will probably need BOAS surgery, but at the time of the training session, the vets were happy for the training to continue, for the training to go ahead. I wasn't. Not at all. I was like, your dog's going to die. I was like, you need to take it back to the vets. I know the vet said they were happy to it, but you need to take it back to the vets and say, look, when my dog sees a dog, the breathing sounds like it's just going to collapse and pass out. It went into surgery, had the surgery, come back, absolutely fine. Yeah. But BOAS surgery is, what is BOAS surgery?
So there is, the reason I said it in sort of exclamation mark, commas like this is because I feel like now that it's really sad that we have a routine BOAS surgery. Like I find that it really is quite upsetting, because it's like we shouldn't have to have this, but it's a necessary, and thank God we do, because it saved Rolo's life. So in Rolo's BOAS surgery, he had his tonsils removed. He had excess tissue that was in the throat removed. He had his soft palate shortened. He had his nostrils widened as well. They put a note saying that, if these don't alleviate the symptoms, then potentially look at turbinates as well, which is the structure in the nose. But he didn't have that in this BOAS surgery, but he had everything else.
Yeah. Okay. It's horrible that it has to be routine surgery. Southfields, I've been there. I've got a funny story about Southfields. I went with a friend of mine because her husband was out of town, and they've got a big Caucasian Shepherd called Clive that some of the audience might have seen. He's on the front cover of my second book. Now, Clive wasn't very good at the vets, and this was during COVID. He had to go to the vets. So some vets come outside, as they did to greet you, and he's like, right, I'll take Clive. I said, he won't go with you, mate. I said, do you want me to come in with you? Yeah, and then he'll be absolutely fine. He went, no, it's fine. I'm used to big dogs. Like, don't worry, mate. I've got this. He had a little slip lead for Clive, right? He put the slip lead on Clive. I've still got Clive attached to a lead at this point, so Clive's absolutely fine. I was like, mate, you're going to want me to come in there with you. He will not go with you. I was like, no, it's fine. So, unclipped the lead. He walked off all cocky. Clive realised that I wasn't holding the lead anymore, turned around to see where I was, yanked him off his feet all the way back to me, and I said, you want me to come in with you now? I went, come on, Clive, let's go. And Clive walked straight in, absolutely fine. But yeah, when I was there, the sad reality is the amount of bulldog type dogs that were there, French Bulldogs, English Bulldogs, pocket bullies, you see a lot in there that were in there for pretty much one thing only, and that is the BOAS surgery. So Rolo had his first surgery at just 1 year old.
Yes.
Yeah. How did you cope with the surgery? How did he cope with the surgery? What was that like after the surgery? Like, you go to pick him up, you bring him home. Yeah. What's going on?
Well, Rolo was really... The recovery for Rolo the first time round was horrific. So Southfields, quite rightly so, would not release Rolo back to us until he could keep stuff down. And he was extremely stressed. They was like, he won't settle down, he's not sleeping, he's just sitting up in the crate, paw in the crate. And Rolo is crate trained, so he's fine in a crate, but and I think they kept him for about 3 days after post-op. And I sort of said, can we just bring him home? We'll try it at home. I just feel like he needs to be with us. And I said, and if there's any issues, I'll bring him straight back, and he came home and he was so poorly. It was awful to watch. We were worried sick about him. It got to the point where I was squishing food onto my hand, sort of tinned food on, and him licking it, because he wouldn't get up. Once he'd sort of got home and laid down, he wouldn't sort of get up. He was very weak. He had obviously all stitching and stuff on his neck. He just looked poorly, he looked sore. And Mark, my husband, was sleeping with him, so he was sleeping of a night with him on the sofa or beside him if we'd got him on the bed. But his recovery was all like worrying, really, really. So much so that my husband actually went to work the next day and had a car accident because he had no sleep and he was worried sick, and I mean, Rolo is Mark's like everything. So it wasn't nice. The first surgery recovery was awful. Yeah.
Honestly, there's nothing like a dog to bring out the soft side of a man, is there?
No. I mean, so Mark's, skinhead tattoos. But when it comes to Rolo, it's like, the hello, my baby, And, but yes, I think there's nothing quite like a relationship with a man and his dog, sort of thing. And it was not very nice, the recovery.
How long was the recovery?
I want to say 3 to 4 weeks before he started even remotely being more like himself and sort of starting to eat a bit better, and it was grueling.
That's not where it ends though, is it? There's a second surgery, isn't there?
Yes, there is.
So what happens there?
On to just make sure that I've got my.
I love how organised.
No, I just want to make sure that it's accurate and that I don't forget anything, because it's really important. So, once he had recovered, which took a long time, he seemed okay for a bit. Symptoms had subsided significantly. But then, slowly but surely, the regurgitation started coming back again.
How did that make you feel?
I was in my, I'm not a vet, I'm not a medical professional, but in my naivety, I just thought, maybe it's all grown back. I just thought, what's happened? Is it possible that it can, the soft tissue and stuff can grow back? It was more of a, oh no, like, not again. Obviously we were backwards and forwards to the vets again, because again, they were sort of looking, well, he's had the BOAS surgery, he's, had what needs to be done, what could this be? Again, acid reflux, anti-sickness we sort of went through the same process again almost, because we had the BOAS surgery, so they thought, well, it can't be that anymore, sort of thing. And yeah, it just got worse and worse. And also what was quite prominent that sort of crept in that we didn't really see the first time round was sleep apnea. So Rolo would be sitting up and trying to sleep, and we was like, mate, come and sit down, come and lay down, sort of thing. And he would be laying down and all of a sudden gasp for air. And you'd be like, mate, and again, that was something that we didn't experience previously. Previously, it was due to the regurgitation, This was a new symptom on top of now the regurgitation that we were getting again. But the sleep apnea was extremely concerning for us. He was, say, trying to sleep sitting up, and whenever he would lay down, there would be this gasp for air. And we obviously went back to the vets again, and they referred us to Queen's Veterinary School Hospital in Cambridge for an assessment. And they did their own assessment, which was, some exercise routines outside and everything else. And they came back and said that they believed that Rolo still had a moderate to high BOAS.
So your dog's had BOAS surgery and he still has
the moderate to high level of BOAS.
That's
that's
insane. You went to Queen's Cambridge.
Yes.
And obviously they will then do their own investigation. They come up with, obviously, he's still got moderate to high BOAS.
Yeah.
Were there any other options they gave you for Rolo?
What they suggested was further investigations, which meant that Rolo had to go under anaesthesia to have a CT of his head, neck, chest and a rhinoscopy. And honestly, it terrified me, because I was like, you don't understand. He stops breathing when he's asleep. And I was just, I was like, the problem is, I kept saying to him, I know he needs it done, but the problem is, and they was like, we know they are specialists in what they do, but I remember him going down for this, just to have the CT scan so they could look at what was going on with Rolo. And I remember saying, just remember, he stops breathing when he's asleep, head up, and I was saying this to them as I was carting him off, but I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified, because this new layer of, symptom was significant. It was, his life depended on it, so but he went and he had the CT scan, and he came out and he was fine, and he didn't have any issues, touch wood, or anything like that. Again, they're specialists.
There are obviously things that people need to think about when getting a dog. Certain breeds do really bad under local anaesthetic.
Yes.
For example, the bigger the dog, generally the worse they're going to do, because they have to have so much anaesthesia.
Of course.
My Rottweiler, bless her, when she had a cruise ship done, they obviously sedate the dog, and she has to be sedated several times, because obviously they sedate her to do the x-rays and the scans and everything like that to first come to the issue. Then obviously time of operation, they have to be sedated to go through it. Every time she was sedated, she'd be like out of it for like the best part of a day and a half afterwards. Like just almost like you'd literally put down a horse or something. Like that, how much drugs are needed to do that. But it's not just that. Obviously flat-faced breeds that do have somewhat breathing difficulties, and this also includes boxers. My where I used to live, my old neighbour, they lost their boxer after it went through, after it was put to sleep through anaesthesia. So basically it had a lump in its groin, and they were going to remove that lump, but when they basically sedated the dog, it stopped breathing, was unconscious for, I can't remember how long exactly it was unconscious for, but basically when they managed to bring it round, the dog basically lost oxygen to its brain, and
horrific.
Yeah, and that was just to have a lump removed, and that was a 5-year-old supposedly healthy boxer. Yeah. So it is horrific. You have to think about that. When choosing a dog, you have to think about obviously going to a decent breeder can potentially reduce the chances of stuff like this happening, but yeah, it's not just when they say it's just a simple routine, we do this every single day. It's not always as simple as that. You are literally putting a dog out to do it. So he come round.
He thankfully was. I mean, he was. You know, he was like a drunk. You know, so
even more docile than normal.
He walked to me. He was like. But interestingly, the results of the investigative, CT and rhinoscopy was that yes, it was BOAS, and yes, obviously it was soft tissue related, but interestingly, it was heavily to do with Rolo's skull structure. So there is two narrow bones that come from the skull, sort of to the back of the nasal cavity, like a wishbone, if you will. And Rolo's they usually sort of sit like that, and the airway passes through. And Rolo's was extremely narrow and long. And they said that there is nothing they can do with those bone structures because they're attached to the skull. He had a short but thick palate, so it was short obviously because he had it shortened in the previous surgery. He had laryngeal collapse, grade 2, borderline grade 3 or 3 because of the efforts that he was having. And they said the clinical signs were severe and the quality of life will be impacted. And I just broke down because they seemed a little bit surprised by the fact that yes, obviously there's BOAS, there's soft tissue, but this is also skull structure. This is bone structure, which there's nothing they can do. It's these two bones come from the skull to the back of the nose, and they can't touch those. Because I was like, well, can they be shaved? Can they be moved? And they was like, we cannot touch them. So that was horrific because I know this sounds, I don't want it to sound cocky. This is not what it's about, but we felt like we did a lot of things right with Rolo in the sense that we had him insured. He was in, we'd taken him to the vet, we'd got him really good insurance, and it was almost like anything that he needs, we got it. Like, we're covered, it's fine, and he's good. But when you're faced with, well, actually, our options are really limited now, was not the news that I wanted at all, that any of us wanted, but when you just and so our choices, our options at this point was the radical resection of the soft palate, what was remaining of it, which essentially was getting rid of it as much as they could. And again, if I can just forgive me, but these two bone structures that I'm talking about, so the airflow goes through and the soft palate obviously goes underneath. Rolo's had been trimmed, so it finished just underneath these two bones. So when he laid down, because the bones were so narrow, it was cutting off his air supply. And that's where that was coming from. And so getting rid of the soft palate would create a bit more airflow because then it wasn't underneath. So this radical resection of what remained of his soft palate. There was no reports of such surgical procedures in veterinary literature, so the outcome was unknown. That was in his report. They knew of one other French Bulldog in the UK that had very recently had this procedure, but the outcome was unknown because they hadn't done it at Cambridge. It was just in somewhere else in the UK, but it was still being monitored, so they couldn't tell me anything else. A permanent tracheostomy was our other option, or they said we can put him to sleep.
So you got 3 options.
Well, yeah, well, like Rolo was 2. So I know it sounds, at the time I was like, no, I'm not putting him to sleep. It's 2. Like, you know, I was, and I honestly just, I sort of broke down a little bit because I just thought, we're covered, we can do anything, you know, and it was like, we can't do just anything though, you know. And honestly, we sort of said, no, we're going to bring him home, but I can't make any decisions right now. And so we come home and we just needed some time to talk about and think about what had just been sort of said to us while we've got this, you know, bundle of joy in our home, that is part of our family. So that was where we sort of were at for a short time. And we honestly were a bit of a loss. We didn't really know. Took us a really long time to get our heads around the information that had been provided to us. And even during the time of Rolo's journey up to this point, obviously we'd been doing more and more research, we'd been trying to look at more literature, we'd been trying to investigate BOAS a bit more, trying to understand it. Never in any of it, as they said, did they say it could be the skull formation.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. And the thing is, obviously, one of the options that you're given, this radical soft palate resection section. I can't say that word. Resection surgery. There we go. With that, there's no information really. Like, it's not been really tried before. It's kind of a stab in the dark. Like, so you can research BOAS surgery till you're blue in the face, but how do you research
something that's not been done? Well, they had knew of one somewhere else in the UK, but it was that again was so new, that had been done so very recently at that point that they were still monitoring that.
Your case study is one of one.
Yeah. And the outcome was, and also like things like, what are the long-term effects of this? Is there side effects of that in the long term? You know, like there was no questions there was no answers that they could.
So, were you given any idea of what side effects or challenges might come if you was to go down that route?
So they had explained that just based on their knowledge and expertise of medicine and of you know, veterinary, they said that rhinitis, because the soft palate obviously separates a bit more the throat and the nose cavity, could mean that he could get infections in his nose.
Joy.
More sort of acid reflux, if you like, again, because there's not this protective sort of flat pen there anymore. So regurgitation, acid reflux could be an issue. That was it. They couldn't honestly sort of give any more than that. They said just based on what we can see, potentially this could happen. Potentially this, but we don't know.
Okay.
And naturally as well, there's that element for me that if he got infections in his nose, he can't breathe again. It was really horrible.
I can only imagine, like, obviously the audience listening at home, if they've ever had to take their dog to the vets because it's unwell, and then when you're giving them not so good news and stuff like that, it's almost like having like your gut ripped out or something like that. That just feeling of emptiness, like, and you now having to put the dog through potentially a second major operation in the space of a year. Like, the dog's 2 years old and he's spent the majority of his life in surgery, recovering from surgery. Like, yeah, that's absolutely gutting. Like, what ultimately led you to choose the radical soft palate resection surgery? I will get that right one day, guys. It's a mouthful. Like, try and say that fast 5 times. Radical soft palate resection surgery. Yes.
So, it was really. I think so. Putting him to sleep for me just wasn't an option. It was. We love him so much, and obviously we would do what we would have to do to make sure that he wasn't suffering. So I'm not going to say that, but in my mind I was like, he's 2 years old, like, I can't give up on him. And the permanent tracheostomy, now I know that has helped so many dogs for different reasons, and not just brachycephalic breeds, for many different reasons, and I know many owners have gone through that and their dog is like living the best life ever. So but for me, honestly, like, we had 2 children, and we'd like do beach days and take the dog with us, and they'd get the paddling pool out and he'd be in the paddling pool with them playing and giving him a bath, and I feel like I would just be worrying about him because he's got this hole, and if anything goes in there, it's in his lungs. And I just thought, well, then I'm either compromising his life because I'd be frightened to do anything, or I'd be compromising my own children's life because I would refuse to do anything because he can't come with us. So it was like a real, I wasn't ruling it out, but that was it was just hard to comprehend that sort of life. And then Rolo got really bad. So Rolo sleeps on the landing outside our bedroom door, and I would lay in bed and I'd listen, breathe, and I could, and I'd be like, and I'd be laying in bed like tossing and turning and thinking, he's not breathing, like, he's just not breathing. It's just the nights that I'd spent sitting on that landing holding his head up, going, please just sleep, boy, please just sleep. And obviously during those times at 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, while I'm doing that, I'm thinking, what should we do? What can I do for you? What is the best option? And then timing wasn't the best. So we then unfortunately lost my father-in-law. And naturally Mark was, because it's Mark's dad. Yeah. So Mark was devastated, of course. But then, so that was happening. So that was going on, and obviously Mark was grieving. But at the same time, I was sitting on the landing at 3 a.m. in the morning holding my dog's head up thinking, I don't know what to do, and I don't want to put pressure on Mark because he's got this going on. And then one day I'd been up with Rolo a lot, and he hadn't slept a wink. And I was just so emotional, and I just said to Mark, I said, he's going to die.
That's okay.
I said,
take your time, it's fine. It's a very emotional thing.
And so I said, I feel like if we don't do something, he's going to die. And I know if we do something, he could still die. But at least we were trying. At least in my mind, and I was like, but at least we were trying, you know. And I felt horrible because Mark was going through what he was going. We were all going, but naturally my husband. And I said, I just don't think we can wait any longer. And Mark said, I just don't. He said, I just don't know that I could lose my dad and my dog at the same time. Which just made me feel awful because I was like, I can't, like, bear Rolo being like this, and I can't bear seeing my husband obviously grieving for his own dad as well. But at the same time, I really felt like we were running out of time with Rolo. And the reason that we decided on the resection, the radical resection, was I felt like that was his best chance. I felt like his best chance of, so on the positive side, the best chance of a, you know, normal life, you know, providing all went well, a normal life where we could jump in the paddling pool with the kids, we could take him to the beach, you know, and everything else. But selfishly, that if that didn't go well, we still had the permanent tracheostomy. And I know that's really selfish because I was sort of, I don't know, like when weighing everything up, I just would have done anything to keep him here.
The thing is I don't envy the decision that you had to make. Ultimately, what you were trying to achieve by doing a radical surgery is for him to have a better quality of life, because right now he doesn't have a quality of life. The timing obviously was terrible, and I'm guessing this is what made Gemma cry on the phone.
we had a therapy session, the two of us, I think, that day.
Gemma, our lovely bookings lady, that's the first voice you speak to when you phone up Southend Dog Training.
She's so lovely.
In the description she's got Gemma cried, so I'm guessing the conversation you and Gemma had about this and why she said you'd be a good person to have on the podcast to tell the story. You made my bookings lady cry.
I'm sorry.
You've probably got a few people in the audience at home that are watching this now. So he goes in, he has the surgery. Same question to after he had the BOAS surgery. How was he after the surgery? So,
he was obviously the very first at Cambridge, so he was treated like royalty.
It's always
as
good.
Rolo expects to be treated. So he was admitted in the October, and they were really happy. They were really pleased with how it had gone. He was in the ICU for 5 days. During that time, he had to have a temporary tracheostomy because of swelling and to ease that pressure. And when he came home, I mean, other than this massive hole in his throat, which was I wasn't expecting that. For some reason, I was expecting it to be all sewn up, stitched up, but they leave it to heal naturally, and I wasn't expecting that, so it was a bit of a shock. He was a different dog. Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't believe that he'd just gone through what he had went through, and we were trying to slow him down. We were like, mate, he'd bring us a toy, or he'd bring us something. We were like, mate, we really can't do this right now. And, and he'd shake it, and like, no, don't shake.
You've got a hole in your throat, mate. Slow down.
And things like when he'd scratch you know, and we'd be like, no, don't scratch, you know. But he came away from that second surgery not nearly as poorly as the first, which was so wild to us because he just, you know, this again was another major, but it was almost like he had a new lease of life.
Go in.
From the get-go, it was ridiculous, the difference.
That must have been such a feeling. It's almost like he's had a very serious surgery that's only ever been performed one time, but he's come out of it like a dog would come out of a routine surgery, if you will. That moment, the audience listening at home, some of you would have been there before, where your dog's had like surgery, whether it's a cruciate operation or something like that, and they need to rest for a period of time, and you're like, mate, stop, and the dog's like, are we going for a walk?
Yeah. Can we play? Come on, like.
But that must have been so nice. Like,
do you know, it was incredible because Rolo was so sleep deprived. And even I remember when I went to Cambridge and I'd said, well, he does still bring us toys to play, so he has still got energy, still wants to play. To the dog that I have now, let me tell you, he was so tired. I didn't realise. Obviously, I saw it, but like when I see him still bringing toys to me or still wanting to play, I saw that as him still having a bit of energy. He's got energy now. we were like, oh my goodness. Relief and just joy. The sheer joy, relief, like we could enjoy him and get to know him properly as he was supposed to be from the beginning.
I love that. So, what have you learned throughout this journey?
That's a really good question. I feel like I've learned so much, yet so little, if that makes sense. Researching the breeder was one of the things that I now understand exactly what that means. Also, something that kind of stood out to me is that although, you know, our general vets that you sort of go to for the odd, you know, ailment and stuff, breed specific information wasn't sort of fed down, if that makes sense. Like we were referred to a specialist that then told us it was BOAS. So I guess relaying the correct information, like I said to you, I was saying to the vet, like, it's not sick, it's, you know, I wouldn't ever get another French Bulldog.
That was going to be my last question for you.
Sorry.
No, it's absolutely fine. It's not just French Bulldogs. It's actually a question I ask all of my clients, regardless of breed. Knowing what you know now, would you get another one? And I ask French Bulldog owners the same thing, and obviously you've just answered it, but I always say, knowing what you know now, would you get another French Bulldog?
I wouldn't, and I'm not, you know, I know that there are amazing breeders out there that do the very best that they can. But my experience with Rolo, I don't know, it's kind of been, it's led me, and the emotional impact, I'd even call it a bit of trauma from it all, has made me feel like some breeds are bred and they are then born suffering a little bit. I don't know if that's appropriate wording for it.
The thing is, it's always a touchy subject when you're talking about flat-faced breeds, when you're talking about poorly bred dogs and things like that. You're always going to upset somebody that either doesn't understand what you've just said because they only hear what they want to hear, I get it every single time I talk about French Bulldogs or talk about pugs. I say how great they are, temperament-wise, fantastic, entertaining, bubbly, lively
Amazing
dogs. Like, don't know when to stop. It's still a bulldog at the end of the day, just in a now smaller, compact size. But health-wise, they suck. And that's not all of them. Some are better than others and things like that.
Of course.
But a French Bulldog, for the best part, is you just have to look at the way that it's been made. It's top-heavy. Most of the pups need to have a C-section to give birth because obviously how big the head and shoulders are in comparison to the rest of the body. They don't have a tail. They're not in proportion with their body. And that ultimately makes them quite an unhealthy breed compared to, say, a Jack Russell or something like that, a Jack Russell or Border Collie. Yes, you have healthier versions, but when I mention this, and I'll try and give as much information as possible, but all somebody hears is, you hate French Bulldogs. I'm like, no, I don't fucking hate French Bulldogs. Like, but this is the audience, like, the majority of our audience, they can listen, they can understand, they get it, but you'll always get that one person, so you can't please everyone.
And,
but
and I've also, done think, like, I'll be scrolling on social media and you'll see someone's put up a really cute video of a French Bulldog that's fallen asleep sitting up. Oh, a long day at the office, and I'm like, that dog can't breathe. And you want to say, have you had your dog checked for BOAS? But at the same time, you don't want them, because I know the feeling, you don't want anyone to go, your dog's not perfect. Your dog's, there's a possibility that your dog is suffering.
The reality is, I've been training dogs now for 13 years, and I'd like to think that we're quite a busy dog training company. I have multiple trainers working for me. They're working for me right now as I'm luckily sat here doing a podcast with you. So we've seen dogs coming and going. We've seen dogs of every shape and size. You think of a breed, we've probably trained it, right? The only dogs I have ever sent home for breathing problems have been Bulldogs. I've never sent a Rottweiler home for breathing problems. I've never sent a Doberman home. I've never sent a German Shepherd home. I've never sent a freaking Australian cattle dog home, a Jack Russell home. I have never sent a dog home for breathing problems where I feel like, honestly, you're so unhealthy that it's actually, it would be criminal to freaking train you. I've sent dogs home because they've come here and when they get out of the car, you notice a limp or you notice something's not right about them. But the only dogs I've ever sent home for breathing problems have always been Bulldogs. The stats, it's there. It is just the reality. Do you feel vets and breeders are doing enough to educate owners about the risks, about the research, about what it entails to own a brachycephalic dog? Let's break it down first of all. Like, breeders, what could breeders be doing more?
I feel like there needs to be like strict licensing in place. I feel like there is so much in my mindset that's changed now, given what I know. I feel like we need to start again with the breed. I feel, but do it healthier, better. That's
the only thing that needs to change is you need to breed them to be slightly leggier,
with a
longer snout. The reality is a dog is led by its nose, right? It's the strongest scent on their freaking being. A dog needs to have a snout. When you're breeding dogs where it's like, where is that nose? Like, you're trying to find that nose, or it's just slightly protruding like a third nipple or something like that. It's not good.
No,
or if you've got a pug walking around that looks like a walking loaf of bread. Like, it's not good. And I love pugs, by the way, just throwing that out there, because now all somebody heard was he hates pugs. It happens. But yeah, I think the breeding, obviously it goes back to, we spoke about this when I did the XL Bully podcast, and we spoke about this every time I talk about breeding. More needs to change for the regulation of breeding, because it's far too easy for, you could effectively, assuming Rolo is intact and things like that, find a dog, breed with Rolo, make a quick buck, but
all of that, yeah. So Rolo is intact because we don't intend, obviously, never would intend to breed him. But this is what I'm saying. So, 90% of humans have conscience and they would never put, but there are people out there that would put that and go,
you could easily still make money off of him. Despite everything that's happened, right?
It's cruel.
It is cruel. I completely agree. Yeah. And you've got to be some sort of freaking backwards, twisted, sadistic person to do that, right? But the point is, that's how easy it is to do it. Yeah. There needs to be stricter regulations on breeding. You look at other countries, other European countries are starting to clamp down, like Norway. They've got a lot stricter now on the breeding.
I think there's another one that has come in recently and said we're not,
But there has to be something there put in place, like maybe a breeding license or something, where you have to meet certain criteria, because it's far too easy. And like yourself, you didn't go to a dodgy person. You went to a friend of a friend. The dog was around children. Everything seemed fine. But there wasn't any health checks in place and things like that. It's far too easy to obtain a dog. It's far too easy to breed a dog. What about vets? Do you think vets are being taught more about this? Do you think they know enough?
So this is what I sort of touched on a little bit earlier, where Southfields and Cambridge, they are specialists in their fields. They were incredible, and the way that they explained things to me, and I mean, one of them had a little skeleton model and was showing me and to try and help me understand. So the specialists within the fields are obviously incredible, but I'm not vet bashing at all. We go to a vet, they treat the dogs, they're absolutely fine, but I think breed specific education or information needs to potentially be better, because like I say, although you could see why acid reflux was potentially a sort of thing, perhaps if someone was a bit, if who we saw or the vet practice that we visited was a little bit more knowledgeable on the breed specific, they might have gone, actually this is really sounds a lot like BOAS. I think they but it's really hard, isn't it? Because it's the same with doctors. You go to the doctor for a sore throat or whatever, but you go to a specialist for your heart. A
lot of days you just go to the doctors to be sent to the hospital. They're just a middleman.
So I know, it's a lot to ask, but to me there's an element of knowledge of specific, I guess, would be better.
Yeah. What advice would you give someone considering getting a brachycephalic dog?
If I couldn't change your mind, I would tell you it's going to break your heart. And I know there are, again, owners out there that are like, oh, my dog's fine, my dog, hang on, I've never had any issues with my dog. And I'm like, I know, and I'm really thankful for that. But the majority of them are not. And I think it's a bigger problem than what we realise. So Rolo being the first one at Cambridge that had the radical resection of his soft palate, his case is now being used to educate and train. His videos, scans and journey has been shown in front of neurologists, because they're now looking at the link between neurological issues and lack of oxygen and breathing. In Porto for lectures, he was shown his case as being, so you can only hope that by speaking, by putting it out there, that there's just more knowledge that this is a bigger problem than what you think it is.
Do you know what, though? That is absolutely incredible, though. Right, that a lot of good has come out of the stress, the heartbreak, the sadness, the fact that Rolo's had to go through what he's gone through, what you guys have gone through. But now he's being used as the poster child to effectively help others going forward. More information, more knowledge, and Rolo's effectively the dog to start that stepping stone. So that's really, really cool. Rolo is the poster child now. Has this experience changed how you view pet ownership at all? Has it put you off dogs?
I think it has, and I don't say that lightly, because Rolo is so loved. But again, I mean, to me, which I didn't think I would, because I never had dogs growing up, to me it's like having another child. And I did not think for 1 second that it would be like that. It is like having another child. They are. So I think it would be like you have to consider having another baby. Considering to have another dog would be like considering to have another child. And you have to take it as seriously as that.
They rely on you for everything. Yeah. They rely on you to take them places. They rely on you to feed them. They rely on you to give them water. They are literally beholden to us in a sense. Their brain cognitive development is the same as a toddler. Like I said, if you throw a tennis ball into the road and there's cars coming, the French Bulldog doesn't stop and wait for traffic to pass. It runs straight into the road. Unless you've taught it otherwise. They don't realise if they bite someone that you could get arrested, although that very rarely ever happens in England, and that's a story for another day. But they don't realise, or that could result in them being put to sleep. They don't rationalise things like that. They are very much beholden to us, and it's our job to raise them, it's our job to care for them, it's our job to teach them, to educate them, and it's our job to provide, as you very well know, healthcare for them when they are sick, when they're unwell, and we protect them like their family. We cry like their family. Do you want to watch a fully grown man cry? Watch him lose his dog. You burst into tears. I've never cried so hard than when I lost Sammy. If someone is facing a similar journey to what you're going through, what's the message you'd like to share with them?
I couldn't honestly recommend enough Queen's Cambridge, because they are just incredible at what they do, but they explain it to you in language that you can understand as well, which was and if I feel for you so much. If you're like, my heart goes out to you if you are going through that. But I could honestly, so it's a 4-hour round trip for us to Cambridge, and I would fly there. I would say there's loads of information on their website and Facebook page and things like that as well. So I would go there, get as much specialist information, give them a call. They are lovely people, and that would be my advice. Go and get it from
wherever you are, travel to Cambridge.
100%.
And this podcast is not sponsored by them in any way, shape or form. To be fair, up until today, I'd never actually really heard of them.
Really?
But it is interesting to know that they helped you, they've helped Rolo, and that if somebody is struggling on where they should go, then you have that. And I think that's about it. Just want to ask you one final question before we say goodbye. How is Rolo doing now?
He's incredible. He's so spoiled, Adam.
I'm not surprised. Fuck me. What did he go through?
He's just cheeky. He's full of life, full of beans, and we are actually enjoying him as a family. We go out for lovely long walks, which he can handle and he can deal with no problem, and he is brilliant.
I love that. That's absolutely fine. All right, Kelly, thank you so much for coming on. I know some of that was quite emotional for you. And again, as you say, it's because they're a member of the family. Reliving stress and trauma that they've gone through, it's emotional. It takes its toll on you. It's just stressful. So thank you so much for coming on and telling your story, and hopefully it wasn't too painful.
No.
Being your first podcast and
No.
all. You seem like as it went on you relaxed a little bit more. But thank you so much for coming on, and I really hope that this podcast can help somebody that might be going through what you're going through and not knowing where to turn, or even if their Frenchie is coughing up bile in a sense and they've been told it's heartburn but it's kind of not going away. Maybe now they can go, well, it might not be that. I really hope that this can reach some people in some way, or at the very least make people think long and hard before getting a French Bulldog, that they're going to the right breeder and they've done their research and everything like that. In a second, I'm going to talk about red flags, what to look for when choosing a breeder, so you hopefully don't make the same mistakes that Kelly made. And yeah, but Kelly, for now,
Thank you very much.
thank you so much for coming on. Red flags to look out for when selecting a breeder. Finding a breeder can be an absolute minefield. It seems these days that everybody and their aunt is breeding dogs. You can go onto Facebook and within seconds you found somebody selling a litter of puppies. However, not all breeders are created equally. Finding a decent breeder is worth its weight in gold. So what do you look for in a decent breeder, and what should get your spidey senses tingling and have you running for the hills? Now, a decent breeder will often quiz you about why you want one of their puppies. For example, if you met a breeder of a Rottweiler and you've never owned a Rottweiler, they might be interested to know why you want a Rottweiler, what makes you suited to a Rottweiler, and what your plans are with a Rottweiler. Now, this might feel like a lot of pressure, and you might feel even a bit strange at some of these questions, but a decent breeder genuinely cares where their puppies end up. A backyard breeder, a dodgy breeder, these people couldn't care. There will often be a contract in place with a decent breeder, and that contract will often state that if you can't look after that puppy for whatever which reason, it is to be returned to the breeder, because they care. Decent breeders, their dogs don't end up in rescue adding to that population. They care about the lineage of their dog. While we're on the subject of lineage, you'll often be able to see the parents from a decent breeder. If you can't see the mum, at the very least, this is a red flag. The mum will give you a slight indication as what temperament those puppies are likely to end up with. If you can't see the mum, for whatever which reason, consider that a red flag. Why? Why can't you see the mum? Is the mum there? If the mum's not there, it should be with puppies. Can you not see the mum because the mum's aggressive? That should be a red flag. A lot of the time you'll be able to see the dad, but that one's not a guarantee. But a decent breeder will be able to tell you about the dad, will know where the dad come from. A decent breeder will often understand the parents, the grandparents, and will have a family tree because they care about that bloodline. They care about that heritage. When looking for a decent breeder, if they try to sell you a 2-for-1, if you want 2 puppies and they're willing to give you 2 puppies, this is not a decent breeder. This is a backyard breeder. Why you never get 2 puppies from the same litter is simple. There's a thing called littermate syndrome or sibling aggression. Littermate syndrome is no joke. Dogs suffering with littermate syndrome can often start fighting with each other, hence sibling aggression. They can also find it incredibly stressful when they are separated. No decent breeder would ever sell you 2 puppies from the same litter. And if you want to avoid the potential disaster of littermate syndrome and you really have your heart set on 2 puppies, then may I suggest that you get puppy number 1, you train puppy number 1, and at around 12 to 18 months of age, when you have a well-trained dog, that you then bring in another puppy. By doing this, they will be close enough in age that they can grow up together, they won't develop littermate syndrome, and life will be a lot easier for you. You'll already have a role model. You'll already have a better understanding of training. Did you know littermate syndrome can also affect puppies from separate litters that grow up together from a young age? So if you get a puppy from one breeder, then go to another breeder and get a different puppy, and they're around 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 weeks of age and they grow up together, they can still develop littermate syndrome. Trust your instincts, guys. If you go into a house and you don't like the conditions that the puppies are in, that the dogs are in, if something doesn't feel right, if you feel you're being pressured, if you feel obligated that you have no choice but to take this dog, run. A lot of people end up in potentially stressful disasters down the road because they went into a situation, they didn't like the conditions the puppies were in, and you develop this hero complex where you want to rescue that dog and give it a better life. But all you ultimately do there is open the door for them to continue breeding. The only way we phase out these dodgy breeders, guys, is by stop funding them. This is why it's so important to find a decent breeder. A decent breeder would have already started the socialization process with your dog, already started getting them used to children if there's children in the house, already getting them used to different sights, sounds and smells where possible with the limitation that they've got. A decent breeder would have done all the relevant health checks, or they would have had the relevant vet visits, and they should have even received their first vaccinations. There is a huge difference between getting, say, a well-bred German Shepherd and a poorly bred German Shepherd. German Shepherds are probably the number one breed that we see at this moment in time. And we're seeing a lot of poorly bred German Shepherds. And what the common issues we are seeing with these German Shepherds is major anxiety and bad joints, really bad formality, really bad back legs. And it's obvious that these didn't come from a decent breeder, because a decent breeder is breeding for health and temperament. Guys, you may think it sounds like a good deal going to just any breeder. You'll even find it might even be cheaper just going to a backyard breeder. But when you weigh up potential vet visits down the line, behavioural training down the line, it really will not work out cheaper. Now, some of you may be watching this and going, I've got 2 puppies from the same litter. This guy clearly doesn't know what he's talking about. Please do understand, guys, that I don't say these things for the fun of it. You may have dodged a bullet, and there'll be people out there that have successfully dodged a bullet. However, we are called to pick up the pieces from the people that weren't so successful. To those people out there that have littermate syndrome, to those people out there that have had to rehome their dog because it didn't work out the way they had planned because they went to a backyard breeder. There was no contract in place to give that dog back. The dog has health problems because there wasn't relevant health checks. Finding a decent breeder is worth its weight in gold. So let's recap. Red flags to look out for. Number 1, trust your instincts. If you don't like the conditions that dog's in, if you don't like the breeder themselves, if something doesn't feel right, run. If there's no contract in place, there is no backup, there is no support, run. If there's been no health checks done, run. If you can't see the mum, run. If you can see the mum, but the mum's in poor condition, or the mum has some sort of problem, chances are that can pass down to the puppies. Run. Guys, it's going to cost you more to go to a decent breeder, but it'll be worth its weight in gold in the long run. Rescue centres are full of dogs that are looking for homes. This isn't a post about that. I'm a huge advocate for rescue, but if you're going to a decent breeder, you will prevent dogs ending up in rescue. By going to backyard breeders, all you're going to do is add to that population. Backyard breeders' dogs, they're the ones that you see in rescue. Decent breeders, their dogs don't end up in rescue.